A few years ago, I made a Christmas tree box. It's been one of the more popular videos on the channel, but I thought I'd try it again, since I've learned some things since then. One thing I learned is I should have never got rid of my miter saw. Yep, I had to make these by hand. Well, kind of by hand. It was kind of a disaster. I won't say that after I did this I remembered I have a miter gauge for my table saw. Here I'm also making a router table, because I don't have one of those either. So, if you need to make a router table, just get a piece of wood, drill a couple holes, boom, router table. I wanted to inlay the backer pieces or the back plates into the frame this year to make for a better finished product. The other thing I wanted to do is make this foldable, because while we love the original box, it's a giant wood box and it's kind of hard to store. So here I made another little jig, and basically you're just making a frame. I used some pocket screws. I probably should have used 2 each. Yeah, I had some warpage and some, I don't know, it just wasn't straight. I ended up having to just kind of force it together. If you're wondering about the Chick-fil-A sauce, well, the Chick-fil-A sauce is actually stronger than glue, but you can only use the original. The Polynesian, it just doesn't hold as well. But original Chick-fil-A sauce works very well. Plus, the Chick-fil-A bottles, well, it never clogs. There you can see I added a hinge, and here I'm just lopping off one of the ends because I need one end to be a little bit shorter to make room for a piece. So what I'm doing is offsetting the hinges here. And I was able to strategically cut off the worst one of my miters that you can see me now filling. So then it's some sanding and your basic prep. Those 4 screws, those are standoffs because I never save enough time to be able to wait for the glue to dry or the paint to dry. So I went ahead and used some just bright red paint to try and make it a little more finished. Then those screws become standoff, so then I can go ahead and start staining. Now, one of the things I've gotten better at since I made the first one is really prep. Now, I still wanted these to look old, so after a first coat of stain, and I used a poly stain where it's mixed polyurethane and stain, it's okay, I don't really advise it. It got really, really red. It really shows anything you do wrong. Now, again, I wanted these to look like they were old, but not quite as old and a little bit better than the original one. So after they dried, you can see a lot of streaking and some other things. So I went back over it with 240 by hand. That's just some Windex I used to clean it off. And then I hit it with some espresso stain. So I made sure some of the edges were coming through, and I really wanted to tone down the red. And oftentimes if you're looking for an older look, different colors of stains, especially if you go from a lighter to a darker, will really make it look old. I made some more stencils using the Cricut and just kind of used a tapping technique. Put some different things on there. I spent a lot of time looking at different sayings for the front, but in the end I ended up just using the North Pole again. I really liked that, and this time I added a little blue to the bottom of the letters on North Pole to kind of make it look cold, and use silver instead of gold. I ended up having to hand draw some of those swirly things, but they turned out better. Here you can see a little piece of wood that raises those hinges, and that's so it can fold in on itself. So I'll put the hinges on one side and then the other. And finally, after it's all done, I've got all the lettering. I take 1000 grit sandpaper and just go over that lettering to kind of age it a little bit. So final polyurethane off camera. And now you can see why we built it that way. I wanted to be able to store it, and I needed to be able to store it flat. So there's the old one. And here's the new one. It simply folds out, and you put it into place. It's a little bit bigger than the other one, which we actually like, but it looks much nicer. The lettering's better, the finish is better, and it folds on itself. So, there you go. Merry Christmas.